What's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 59 of Stack Sats or Die Trying. This is the Bitcoin Only Show brought to you by the Black Wealth Rebels and by the Hood. This is episode 59. This is the Rajon Tucker episode. That's difficult. Number 59 is crazy difficult. Anyway, episode 59 of Stack Sats or Die Trying. I'm your host as always. My name is Jimmy, and I come to you every week to talk about what's going on in the world of Bitcoin. Today's episode is going to be interesting, right? Because I don't necessarily like to talk about price action because it's kind of irrelevant to me. But I found this to be interesting. So what am I going to do? I want to share it with everybody because, that's the way the ball bounces, G. And I'm going to talk about Bitcoin reaching 250K in 2025. Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's possible? Let me know what you think, right? Let's get into it though, right? Let's talk about it. So Bitcoin to 250K in 2025. Totally possible, says crypto analyst Scott Melker. So that's interesting to begin with, right? So Scott Melker, who what's his title? The Wolf of All Streets, right? Talks about how he believes that Bitcoin can hit 250K. That's not a typo. In 2025. So let's start by saying this. It's a bit aggressive. I'm saying, do I think it's possible? I think anything is possible. In the words of Kevin Garnett, anything is possible.
Anything's possible. Anything's possible.
But is it probable? Let's talk about why he says this, right? So he was recently said that he said this because he was being interviewed for a podcast, by the way, right? So let me unpack some of the reasons why he said why. He was talking about the fact of institutional adoption, which we talked about last episode when we talked about Bitcoin maturing and everything going on with Bitcoin, and that being part of his actual thesis. So that's one of the reasons why he said it could happen. He talks about the volatility. He says it used to be about 3 times as volatile as the S&P. Now it's less than 2 times as volatile as the S&P, right? So volatility is decreasing because of the adoption of industry that is less volatile. He thinks this can actually help it kind of keep its number, but also grow. He said it's increased involvement from pension funds and ETFs, which is evidence of a more mature, stable market. We've talked about this in previous episodes. He also said the shift reflects a broader trend of institutional adoption. The more institutional money that goes in, the more Wall Street money, the more long-term holders get involved, the less volatile it's going to be. So that decrease in volatility, as I just said, he believes is all a positive thing in terms of it being able to grow, right? So we know we already got BlackRock, we've got Fidelity, we got ARK Invest, and they all have Bitcoin ETFs, right? Which then allows pension funds, endowment funds, and even boomers, right? Boomers who hate Bitcoin will now have it in their brokerage account through one of these other things, right? So that will help. That will help in terms of the Bitcoin growing. Getting 250K though, still don't know yet. But let's keep it moving though, right? Because that's not the only reason that he gave, right? He talked about Bitcoin as it relates to gold as well, which is something that we definitely have to talk about. And we've talked about a number of times on here, Bitcoin and gold, right? So when you think about it, gold's market cap is about $13 trillion. Bitcoin is a little above $2 trillion, right? So if you think about Bitcoin and capturing part of the gold market, I'm not even saying it has to get the full gold market, but if gold is 13 trillion and Bitcoin is 2 trillion, what happens if Bitcoin just gets a fraction of gold's market cap, right? Let's say it gets a third of it. You're talking about 6 figures per coin. That math is math to me. So I can see the 6 figures per coin. 250 is still a little bit aggressive, right? But But when you think about the fact that it's 13 trillion, right? I said a third. Now say it gets half of it. Let's say it gets half. Let's say it goes from 2 trillion to 6 trillion, right? And we're at 100K. We're above 100K as I record this, by the way. We cracked 106 as I record this, but I digress. We're at 100K, right? So we're talking about 3 times the value if it goes to take half of gold's market cap. So now you're talking about $6 trillion in market cap. That puts you at a bright, that's how you start to get to that 250, 300 range. Again, a bit aggressive, but I do see where he's going with this. He also talks about this. He talks about Coinbase. And for those who don't know, Coinbase is now in the S&P 500, which is a major milestone for crypto overall, right? So what he said was it entering the index, but not doing so the top 50 by market cap is a reflection of how deeply rooted some crypto firms have become. And he's saying that he believes that Coinbase, is one of those firms that is deeply rooted and will continue to grow. You got firms like Galaxy Digital, eToro. They all have public listings coming up. We all know about MicroStrategy. So there's a lot of things happening in the space in terms of companies now becoming publicly traded companies. My favorite company in the space, not trying to give them another bumpkin, but Fold is publicly traded. You know what I mean? And just being transparent, I am a Fold shareholder, a proud Fold shareholder. You know what I mean? But I say that to say that that's another sign of what's happening in the space. But there's a lot going on. So I don't know if you believe what Melker says, because that's a bit aggressive. Right now, we're sitting at about 106, and he said 250 within a year. That means that it will more than double between now and we're in May, towards the end of the year. We've got 7 months left, right? So let me know what you think about that. Do you think that it's something to what he's saying, or do you think that's still a little bit too aggressive? And if you do think maybe he's too aggressive, what is your target? Again, I generally don't come on Stack Sats or Die Trying and talk about price, because to me, once you understand the value proposition, the price kind of doesn't matter. But I do think it's interesting time and time to talk about price when you hear these wild price predictions, to see what analysis people are doing in terms of making that prediction. What are they seeing in the market that maybe you are seeing or that you're not seeing? That's kind of what I'm thinking about, right? So something else from this article. By the way, this article comes from Cointelegraph, which talks about, Melker's prediction, but then it gives you a little bit more context. It says, don't rule out a wild run. Despite the optimism, Melker tempered his expectations, noting that most experts are forecasting cycle highs between 120 and 150. But he says that wild surges are not out of the ordinary. So from the 2020 lows to the last bull market, Bitcoin went from 3,000 to 69,000, which is a 2.5x. And from here, that wouldn't be a big deal. So this goes back into that whole idea of Bitcoin versus gold, right? And what it says is Bitcoin's position relative to gold has improved considerably since April. And this is the indicator that gives hope for higher expected returns later this year. So later this year, we're looking at higher expected returns. So BTC-USD, which is Bitcoin in US dollars, is close to extreme greed, which sounds scary, but it's also where we would expect to be if Bitcoin follows the 4-year cycle. So everyone knows that Bitcoin is on a 4-year cycle in terms of the halving. We've talked about this in previous episodes of Stack Sats or Die Trying. And what they're saying is it's still playing out the same way. It's still playing out the same way, even as of right now. You know what I mean? So, and there's other analysts who also say, so there's Peter Chung, he's the head of research at the quantitative trading firm Presto. His prediction, which he made on April 28th, is that we'll hit 210,000 by the end of this year, right? And also this analyst from Standard Chartered and Intellectual AI Institute said that Bitcoin will reach, well, actually he didn't give a number. He said it's just going to double from where it is. And at that time it was above 100,000. So that's another $200,000 prediction. So we have 200, we have 210. The Wolf of Wall Street says 250. What is Jimmy saying? Here's what I'm saying, right? I want to be clear, first off, this is not financial advice, right? This is for information and educational purpose only. But here's what I will say about all of this, right? If Bitcoin does go to $250,000 and you don't have just a little bit of Bitcoin and you watch this show, what's wrong with you, y'all? What's wrong with you? Think about it. Think about the opportunity, right? The opportunity. Imagine being offered some beachfront property like back in the 90s. Someone says, yo, here's a chance to get some beachfront property. And you're like, I don't know. Ain't no Starbucks here yet. So I don't know if I want this property. How would you feel right now? Right? And I think another part that I want to make clear is we're talking about per Bitcoin. But this show, and I always say this, is Stack Sats or Die Trying. And we talked last episode about how a Satoshi is a fraction of a full Bitcoin. You do not need a whole coin. And that's the beauty of it. Start small, stack sats, just be consistent. How you win in the game of Bitcoin is consistency. Consistency is how you win. Be consistent. Because here's the thing. If this 250K prediction, right, hits a $500, like right now, a $500 investment would be worth $2,000, right? That's not magic, by the way. That's just math, right? It's not magic, it's math. So the fact is, you don't have to have a whole coin. You can stack sats. There are ways to stack sats even without buying anything. That's the crazy part. When I give you guys these gems on using Fold, right, to get Bitcoin back for everything that you purchase, any Bitcoin that you acquire, and it's crazy. I got like 1% of a full coin sitting in my Fold now just from the last couple months. And I'm sitting there laughing because I know people that are out here like, yo, I'm going to do this with rewards cards. I'm going to get this reward card. And I just laugh, right? You listen, you use your rewards cards and get your Amex points. Have fun with that. But when I'm getting points back either via credit card or debit card, the actual value that I'm getting back is now growing. It's growing, right? It's literally growing because I'm not getting points. I'm getting something that's appreciating in value because it's a bet against the dollar. So when you get your Amex points, you go use them on Amazon. You get you a free flight. That's cool. But I literally, and again, I'm not saying this to brag or saying anything because I'm consistently giving this message out here on this show. This is episode 59 and whatnot. You can go all the way back to episode 1. So it's been over a year, almost 2 years that I've been doing this show. And if you go back to the beginning, the message is consistent. The message is to become a stacker, change yourself mentally, look at the market different. You want to become a stacker. You want to become someone that's building for the long term and not anyone chasing the next shit coin or go fly by night, go buy this or this next AI stock. You want to become an actual builder and you want to become a stacker of Satoshis. And then when you use those strategies like Fold or even the games, I talk about various games you can play to get Bitcoin back from just playing around with games on your phone. Guess what's going to happen with those sats? It may look like a small number of sats now. You may get 1,000 sats here, 1,000 sats there. Those add up. You get to 1 million sats, you're talking about 1% of a full coin. What are we talking about now? If you get to 10% of a coin, right, which, that's a nice amount. In the future, what will that 10% of a coin be? What will that 10% of a coin be? Right now, you have 10%. You're talking about over $10,000. But what happens when Bitcoin gets to be it gets to be $1 million a coin, right? So this is why when you stack right now, and it sounds crazy, it sounds wild to say, it sounds wild because even 250 sounds wild to me, right? Because again, I don't care about price, but I thought this episode was interesting because, we're also going up currently, but I'm cutting on the TV. I'm looking at the Bitcoin news and I'm seeing crazy predictions. This one stood out to me because he had like a little thesis behind it in terms of what I just talked about last episode. So I said, let me build on this and talk about this week. People like price numbers anyway. So let's talk about it. If it hits 250. If it hits 250, all those stats, and specifically for the folks that have been stacking with me for the last several years, if you've been riding along this journey with me since 2016, you're up right now. There is no way that anyone who's taken a class that I've given in the community or has set in on private classes that I've taught and I've given you guys the places to go and things to do and you've taken action that you're down right now. Unless you didn't have the stick-to-itiveness when we see kind of drawdowns and you sell out of everything. But if you've been holding, if you've been stacking, if you change your mentality, if you're using Fold, if you're using Swan, shout out to all my new folks who are using River and using my link because I appreciate you because here's the thing. Shout out to the affiliate program for one, but also two, now you're actually getting sats back on your cash. I have put people down with a way to put cash in an FDIC insured account and get your interest paid to you in Bitcoin. So then what happens is your Bitcoin is eventually going to surpass the cash that you're using to get the Bitcoin. That is a cheat code. So my point in saying that is if you consistently watch this show, Stack Sats or Die Trying, if you're watching The Village, I appreciate you because those who don't know, we have our own little community, which is known as The Village, right? And they get access to this content early. And they do that join by going to blackwealthrebels.com. It is a free tier, completely join for free. Even the free tier gets access to this show early. So if you're watching early in The Village, salute to you. But if you've been building with me in The Village and starting to stack sats in The Village, then, listen, you're up right now. But what happens if this prediction is true? On the flip side is this. What happens if the prediction isn't true? What happens if we go to half? Are you still willing to stand the course? If we go from 106 to 53, how do you respond to that? That's where you'll be really tested. It's easy to stay in when we go from 106 to 200. But what happens when we go to 106 to 53? That's where you'll be tested at. And that's always the interesting part about now. Next year will be 10 years that I've been in this space. And over the last 10 years, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot, not only about the actual asset, but about myself. And one of the things that this has allowed me to do is become a better investor, not only in this space, but in other spaces. Because when I gotta even mention this episode, when I do the knowledge.
Do the knowledge, nigga.
and I start to understand an asset, now price literally doesn't matter. The price of the S&P 500, don't care, right? The price of Top T, one of my favorite holdings, don't care. The price of Bitcoin, BTC, don't care. What I do care about is the value proposition the same for the S&P? Is the value proposition the same for Bitcoin? Is the value proposition the same for Top T? If so, I'm stacking them, and I'm going to continuously stack them. And I'm going to spend my time doing things to then generate more, to put more money in there, man. Like, so that's just what it is, man. So 250K is the prediction. Do you think we'll hit 250? And if we don't hit 250, what is your prediction for Bitcoin December 31st, 2025? Put it in the comments. Send it to me on socials. If you're in the village, let me know what you think. What is your prediction for Bitcoin at the end of the year? My prediction, still the most valuable asset. TikTok, another block. I do think that will hold. I think the volatility will start to decrease just based upon some of the things that the Wolf of Wall Street's Mr. Melker has said. But I don't care if we hit 250. But I would like to know what you guys think. If we hit 250, would I be surprised? Absolutely not. If we hit 50, would I be surprised? Crazy part is, no, I wouldn't. Actually, I might be a little bit more excited because I'd be copping like crazy. I'd be in here trying to sell a kidney or something. Anyway, y'all, listen, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Give me some feedback. Remember, become a stacker. Ignore the noise. Enjoy your family. Stay safe out there, man. I love you. Go to blackwealthrebels.com. Make sure you join the village. And be on the lookout for everything we got going on in the community, man. We got a lot going on in the community. If you listen to the audio, salute to you. Love you audio listeners as well. But as I always say, stack sats or die trying. Peace.